been getting great reviews across media and from readers and steadily climbing the charts. And got it signed by our esteemed guest, Ms. Shabana Azmi, and the editors Rinki, Bhattacharya and Maithili. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to publish this book. We are immensely grateful to Shabana ji for doing us the honor of releasing this book today.
Why so many celebrations? So 1, 2, 3. Congratulations. 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 तालियां बहुत जल्दी एग्जॉस्ट हो जाती है। हम जब तक स्माइल करें तब तक
Home International Publication and my all writers who wrote here in the book. But please forgive me, I am very comfortable in Hindi.
Please,
So,
yes, Hindi में
so
बोलो।
I will speak in Hindi. माँ क्या होती है? हम जब स्कूल में थे तभी पोएम्स आती थी माँ के ऊपर, और माँ इतनी प्यारी, इतनी प्यार करने वाली, एक वो उसके वर्णन हमारे टीचर पढ़ते थे, या किसी पोएम ऐसी होती थी कि माँ गुजर गई है, बच्चा माँ की याद में वो उसको याद करता है कि तू फिर से जन्म ले और मैं तेरा बच्चा फिर से हो जाऊंगा वगैरह। तो वो कुछ सुन के हमें रोना आता था, लेकिन मुझे तभी रोना आता था, लेकिन मैं जब घर जाती थी तो मुझे मेरी माँ को इस तरह का फीलिंग कभी लगता नहीं माँ के बारे में, क्योंकि मैं जिस समाज से आई हूँ उस समाज में, दलित समाज में, मेरे घर में मेरे पिताजी टीचर थे। हम 3 भाई 3 बहनें थे, लेकिन एक बहन की शादी हो गई थी, एक भाई छोटा उसका देहांत हो गया था, और हम 4 भाई बहनें थे। तो मेरे पिताजी ने मेरी मदर को बोला था कि बच्चों को पढ़ाओ, कोई भी हो, लेकिन मेरी माँ अनपढ़ थी तो वो टोकरियाँ बुनती थी, और टोकरियाँ बुन के वो हमारा निवाला करती थी। तो खाने में ऐसी वैसी चीज़ होती थी, और बच्चों का ध्यान तो खाने पे ही रहता है। तो मुझे लगता था अरे क्या ये बनाती, बहुत, मैं अभी ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं लेंगी क्योंकि उसमें ज़्यादा टाइम लेगा। मैंने द व्यू ऑफ माई लाइफ करके मेरा आत्मकथा लिखा है, तो उसमें सब दिया है उसमें। तो माँ मेरी टोकरियाँ बनाती हुई एकदम ऐसा, मेरे पिताजी भी, मैं 3rd स्टैंडर्ड में थी जब वो भी गुजर गए, तो उनकी याद में रोती थी। मेरा भाई जो गया उसकी याद में रोती थी। उसका रोना हुआ चेहरा, और वो काम करती है, उसके कपड़े अच्छे नहीं हैं, और हमारा स्कूल था, उसको रास्ते, हमारे रहने का जो ठिकाना था, उसे रास्ते से स्कूल के बच्चे आते जाते मेरी माँ को देखते थे। तो मुझे बहुत ही बुरा लगता था कि मेरी माँ बुरी है, खाने पीने में भी अच्छा नहीं बनाती थी, और हमको उल्टा वो कैसी भी भाजी या रोटी करती थी तो खाना हमारे निवाला गले में जाए, इसलिए स्टोरियाँ बनाती थी और स्टोरियाँ बताती थी। तो वो स्टोरियाँ हमारी याद में होती थी, लेकिन वो उसके बारे में था चीड़ मेरे मन में। मैं जब बड़ी हो गई, मुझे नौकरी लगी, मेरा मित्र नौकरी करता था, मुझे बच्चे हो गए, तब मुझे लगा कि मैं माँ को दिखाऊं कि बच्चों को किस तरह पाला जाता है। तो मैं जानबूझ के मेरे बच्चों को कपड़े अच्छे पहना के, खाना वाना डब्बे में दे के, लड्डू बिड्डू जाके वहाँ चक्कर लगाती थी। वो नज़दीक ही रहते थे, और मेरी माँ तो अपना टोकरियाँ बुनने का काम करती। तो मुझे उसका और भी गुस्सा आता था कि ये अभी मेरा भाई सर्विस करता है, उसकी मिसेज भी सर्विस करती है, कमाते धमाते हैं, तो अभी ये क्यों करती है, काम करती है। तो कभी भी मुझे बहुत उसका गुस्सा आता था। लेकिन बाद में मैं बड़ी हो गई, मेरे बच्चे बड़े हो गए और मैं दूरी मेरे माँ की और मुझ में वैसे ही रही। मैंने प्यार मम्मी को इतना नहीं दिखाया और उसने मुझे नहीं दिखाया। होगा, मैं जब बीमार पड़ती थी तो वो आती थी, पट्टी वट्टी रख रही थी, टेम्परेचर देखती थी तो उसका स्पर्श अच्छा लगता था, लेकिन प्यार इतना लगता नहीं था। मैं बड़ी हो गई, मेरी भी लड़की आ गई, मेरी यहाँ एक फ्रेंड आ गई है और पोइटिस्ट है हमारी हीरा बंसोड़े, अपनी बहू को लेकर आई है। देखो पोइटिस्ट है, उसकी फॉरेन में भी पोएम पढ़ाई जाती है और यहाँ भी मुंबई में वगैरह उसकी पढ़ाई जाती है, कवियत्री है। तो उसने मेरी माँ को देखा, मेरी माँ आई थी तो जब मेरा लड़का मेडिकल में सेकंड ईयर में था, मेरी लड़की इधर आई है मालविका, शी इज प्रोफेसर, तो वो और छोटी बेटी, दो बेटियां और मेरा एक बेटा, तो उसका एक्सीडेंट हो गया। और उसका जब ये हो गया तब मेरी माँ कैसे रोती थी, क्या करती थी, वो क्यों नहीं उसका किसी जगह ध्यान था और वो टोकरियां बुनने में अपना क्यों समय निकालती थी। ये सब मेरे ध्यान में आ गया। मैंने माँ को पूछा था, माँ तुम बताओ कि माँ होना है क्या होना, पहले बता। पर मुझे लगा ये क्या बताएगी, तो उसने बोला माँ होना यानी सूली पे चढ़ना। इतना आसान शब्द में उसने बताया, सूली पे चढ़ना, और वो सूली पे थी। तो वो क्या बोली थी वो बाद में मुझे तब का क्षण था और आज भी, आज तक मैं मेरी माँ को याद करती हूँ। धन्यवाद।
Here we have Lalita ji here, we have Gayatri here. I'm not sure if Richa has come. So, like Priyanka, if we could just stand up, we're doing this wonderful book with her. Lalita ji, Gayatri, wonderful collection of Sufi poetry in translation we're doing with her. So, there are quite a few others I think I'm missing, will write to me later, but that's okay. So, this is a very special book, and because when we talk of mothers, we have been conditioned to think of just two binaries. One is mere paas maa hai, and the other is mere do anmol ratan Ram Lakhan. You know, that's the be all and end all of motherhood as we have known it in our culture and across the world, I think. But this is a book that takes a very different perspective to it, and looks at it from a number of prisms, and some of which I found very, very startling, because I didn't know that there are people who would be willing to write about all of this. I'm sure all mothers feel that way at some point of time. All children feel that way about their mothers often, but to put it out there is a different experience, and this book has everything. And it's such a special thing to have contributors like Kamala Das and Shashi Deshpande and Manu Bhandari and Shabana ji and Saeed Akhtar Mirza Saab and Maithili and C.S. Lakshmi and Vaidehi. I could go on, and Deepa, all of them within the covers of one book. That doesn't happen, Please clap. So it's a special book that way. So many of the authors here are actually stalwarts of Indian writing in English. So I'll start off with Maithili and Rinki as to the process, and then I'll come one by one. I'll come to the others here. Maithili, Rinki, what was it like when you first thought of the anthology? What was the idea behind talking about motherhood, and also calling it the oldest love story? I think that's a terrific title for a book, on motherhood.
Shantanu,
I'm so overwhelmed right now that I'm speechless. So I think I would, honestly, I mean, putting together a book like this with such stalwarts, and I mean, I'm so fortunate to have so many of my authors here. It's been totally, what can I say, a fabulous journey, and we could survive COVID, I think, thanks to this book. The last 2 years, when we were shut up at home and I was scribbling.
He couldn't make it, but his son speaking about his mother, and we have daughters talking about their mothers and seeing them as women, not as just their mother. And then there is a sort of self-exploration that is really such a learning experience to read them. And Shabana, though, she's the star of the book. But you're a National Award winning actor and a very eloquent person.
In fact, some of the best responses I've had have been on Shabana Ji's essay. Everybody's coming back with, I'll read just a line from that a little later to give you before I hand over the mic to Shabana Ji to talk about her experience with her mother. Rinki Di made a very good point, like Rinki Di and Maithili and all the other contributors, this thing about somehow going through the pandemic and making through it, give that sort of thing. For me as an editor, it was even more like that, like I was at an event last week in Kolkata and I was thinking that these 2-3 books that we have published in the last few months and which we worked in the worst phase of the pandemic is what actually kept me sane, kept me looking forward to a day like this probably, So it's if the editors and the authors have actually put that much work and survived this, as an editor, as a publisher, we have also sort of gone through this phase only on the strength of books like this. So one of the things about this book, and I'll come to that, is as Maithili said, it is not all sugar and spice and everything's nice sort of thing. And Shashi Deshpande's first essay in this book is, we learn about motherhood, about being mothers from our mothers. And what were the nuggets of wisdom I picked up from my mother? I learned that a mother is like God. I learned that a mother is constantly sacrificing herself for her children. I learned that a mother is one's refuge. I learned that childbirth is painful but joyous. I learned that love springs naturally and spontaneously in you. I learned that a mother can never be unjust or unfair. And was that the reality? I saw, even as a child, that mothers often tire of their children, that sometimes they're so tired that they say things like, oh God, what do you want now? And why don't you go out or even get out of my sight? This is that sort of a book. It takes in the experience from all perspectives. So we'll talk about all of that, and Deepa's essay is one of the most brilliant essays in that which addresses this aspect of, not being a mother. But I'll come to Shabana Ji. Shabana Ji, the first line of your essay is, her fragrance preceded her, Khas in the summers, Mitti in the rains, Shamamatul Ambar in the winters. What a beautiful way to describe one's mother. Could you please talk to us, tell us about your experience with your mother?
Before I say that, I think this book is as much a testimony to both Rinki and Maithili and their immense persuasive powers, as it is to the subject itself. I think to write about your mother and to write honestly and to write succinctly is can only happen, for me at least, when a deadline is pushed in front of me, as Maithili did. Shabana, you have to do it now. Okay, so Shabana sat up and started writing, and I wrote it in one go. My relationship with my father is a very celebrated one, but the fact is that I had an extremely intimate and a very warm relationship with my mother, who's a who was quite remarkable in many ways. And so when I just picked up pen to paper, the first thing that struck me is that her fragrance preceded her. She was a woman of great aesthetics, and I always associated fragrance with her. So it came from that. What I find quite remarkable about my mother is that in every way she was, a complete homemaker. She was a very good wife, a very good partner, a very good mother, but at no point did she let that get in the way of her work. So she was one of those women who managed to create space for herself and her own identity, and yet she was able to do all these other things. I remember once when I told her, I said, Mummy, what is it that you, when you look back on your life, what do you think is the most satisfying thing that you've done? And she said, my acting. She didn't say my husband, she didn't say my children, she said my acting. And that's what I find really, really quite remarkable about her. And the fact that, like I've said in the essay, she was blunt to her point. I mean, she could put you really in trouble, which you will know when you get to read
your
the book.
Your experience of her reaction to Fasla was quite. So had that been your first film?
No, but for that I have to first say what she said about me in Ankur, only then Fasla. Okay, so this mother of mine, this actress whom I admired a great deal, saw my very first film, Ankur. And she was sitting a couple of rows before me. And she turned around, she saw the film, and she just said, Shabana, you're a very good actress, and I'm very proud of you, and this is a very good film. And I sort of sunk into my chair, but all kinds of people are looking around, ki kya hai, kya aakhir ye, kya bol rahi hai. Anyway, 2 months later, I took her very confidently to another film that I'd done, which is Fasla. And exactly with the same tenor in a voice, she said, शबानी इतनी बेहुदा फिल्म और तुमने इतना बेहुदा काम किया कि अगर तुमने मुझे ये फिल्म पहले दिखाई होती तो मैं तुम्हारी शादी किसी लंगड़े लूले पहले से कर देती, लेकिन फिल्म इंडस्ट्री पे नाजिल नहीं करती. So she was exactly, you take it or leave it, that kind of person. So she was not one of those Nirupa Roy characters from Hindi films, I can tell you.
And also she didn't quite take your tantrums very well. She could put you down on your tantrums also. You mentioned in one place about.
I don't know whether I mentioned that in my.
Yes.
You did, because I think you said you were having breakfast, and then your brother Baba's school bus.
Oh my God! I've opened up all my secrets in this book. I don't even remember. Oh.
She took the toast from your plate and put it in, and you thought she didn't love you.
No, that's not the real incident, which is very beautiful. Is that there was a period when I started becoming very rude because I felt that my mother loved my brother more than me, and so I was behaving very rudely. And so she called me. I was 9, imagine, and she said, "What's your problem? So why are you behaving so rudely?" So I said, "Because I think you love Baba more than you love me." So she says, "See, I'm your mother, but I'm also a human being. You're a very rude and obnoxious girl, and that's why I don't like you. Your brother is, that's why I don't like you. Your brother is a very well-behaved and a very gentle boy, and so obviously I will react to him like that. So imagine if your own mother reacts to you, what will the world do with you if you continue to behave?" Let me tell you, from next day onwards, I gave up all my rudeness and everything. And then when I tell her, I say, "Mom, how could you have the guts to say that to a 9-year-old child? I could have been decimated for life." She said, "I didn't even think about it. Because today's parents would say, oh my God, usko inferiority complex ho jayegi." Because she was so steadfast in the love that she had for me and that she had grounded me with, that she could be totally blunt. And so if any of your children are behaving rudely, let me tell you, follow Shaukat carefully.
Shabana ji has a great line.
And they're agonizing over motherhood. They read so much of child psychology, say, I do this, but God, I'll traumatize my child. And then not just Freud is very long time ago. Right now there's so much of pop psychology and articles, they're saying you're going to mar your child for life if you do this. So the amount of guilt a woman feels when she's having a child, and what if I do this? If I do this, what will happen to the child? That kind of a fear, if I was in that place, I too would have been like Deepa. I said, I won't have a child. I don't know, I'll have to live with guilt all my life if my child didn't turn out well, I mean, I really feel that there is so much of pressure, some of which is self-wrought, and some of which is the media created thing that, mothering, not parenting, it's mothering. It's not so much that both the parents are responsible for a child's emotional and intellectual growth. All the pressure is on the woman to be a good mother, that you make the child. And that's too much of a burden for a woman to take on if she has other interests. That's what Shashi Deshpande writes in her. It's a kind of an overview of motherhood. Not just her personal thing, but her observations about what motherhood, I mean, if you make motherhood your be all and end all of your life, you'll be sort of destroyed. Hello. Sorry. That's what she said, motherhood can devour a woman and her children. That's what she writes in the book. And so, as I said, the book has many points of view. You have celebratory articles on the mothers who shaped them, and also critical articles and anger on behalf of their mother. Why didn't my mother protest? Why did she take all this? The burdens. So,
Maithili, would you like to talk about your mother? Because Maithili's essay in this book is one of the most visual essays, along with, I think, Vaidehi's essay. It's almost like you can picturize, somebody shooting the whole thing, and it comes alive. So if you could talk about, because it's such a fascinating story at the end of the day.
I mean, I was wondering whether, as an editor, whether I should write or not write. Then Rinki said, no, you better go ahead and write. And I'd written a smaller piece of this sometime in another version. Then I found that my mother was a 17-year-old girl studying. She just finished her inter in Mysore. She grew up in Hyderabad, then went to Mysore, and she married this man. My father was 16 years older than her, with 3 stepchildren, voluntarily. Her parents left it to her. They knew the family, and when the rishta came, they said, why do you want to, it's up to you, because she was their firstborn and very pampered. She used to go to Maharani's college. She had music lessons from one of the Chaudhuri, the great violinist, that kind of a thing. And then she said, I found her idealism and her reasons I found as a teenager. I asked her when I was a teenager, why did you marry daddy? He was so much older than you, and she was a very, very pretty woman, very accomplished woman. I said, why did you? She said, it's such a naive answer. So many, her brother, my mama was part of the underground. He was a cart-carrying communist fighting for the freedom movement. She said, I've seen so many people fighting for freedom. I'd like to be a mother to 3 motherless children. I thought, but then she had her own insecurities. I described how she overcame, because we never called her mommy, we called her kaki, like my half-brothers and sister did. Till I was 8 years old, I didn't even know that my siblings were like what they call the step-brothers and all, half-brother and sister. But my sister was such a surrogate mother to me. She was 10 years older. But then she was very conscious that she shouldn't be overtly, more demonstratively affectionate to her biological children, and then feel that, she wanted to prove the stereotype of the bad stepmother, I think, when I think back rationally. So that's what I went on in that book, in that essay.
Thank you so much. The other really, among all the other brilliant essays here, is Manu Bhandari's. Rinki, if you'd like to talk about it, it's such a stunning piece of, and I think it's the one gem here of all the gems here. It is the one gem that really stood out for me also. It's a fantastic story. If you coming from this wonderful reminiscence, I'll come to Deepa. Maithili writes in her introduction, Deepa Gehlot is the dissenting voice. Hers is a rational repudiation of essentializing motherhood as something without which a woman is incomplete. Deepa, your take on, and which I found really stunning, that in a culture like ours, somebody could actually put forward a take like that.
I think that, as you already said, that in our culture we deify mothers, and because you have created this aura around motherhood, it becomes imperative for women, especially married women, obviously, who feel that after you have to have a child, otherwise you're incomplete, and what will the neighbors say, and what will the in-laws say, and what. And quite often they may not be prepared for motherhood, they may not be willing to take on the responsibility, and still it's something that is forced onto them. And the maternal instinct may not be part of their psyche, but they're expected to do it because that's what they're supposed to do. Otherwise, if they don't, then society will say, oh my God, this selfish, wicked woman doesn't want to be a mother. And selfishness is a word described most often for women who don't want to have children, or rather couples who don't want to have children. How can you be so selfish? And now more than ever, and I've ended my essay saying that now more than ever, it's foolish to bring children into this world. I mean, you don't know when the child is going out whether it's going to come back, because there are, look at America, school shootings, there's pandemic, there's terrorism, there's war. There's a huge burden on Earth's resources, and you want to bring a child into this world. And speaking for myself, I think it just so happened that I had a very busy career, and my friends got married before me and had children. And without exception, they would in their weak moments would tell me, "Arey Baba, if I didn't have this kid, मैं किधर से किधर पहुंच गए होते? I would have, my career would have taken off, and my marriage would have been happier, and I wouldn't have my in-laws on my back all the time." And not a single woman, I mean, my friends, I'm not talking for the whole world, were happy with the experience of motherhood. They had to pretend to be happy, and they had to pretend to be good mothers, because, well, again, that was expected of them. But if they could go back and undo, this whole thing, at least half of them would choose not to have children. At least from that, I'm judging by what they would tell me. And I said in the earlier Zoom thing, I mean, one of my neighbors, who was the one who told me, "Arey, tera kya hoga? Tera to koi nahi hai. You should have had children." And I said, "You have children, and who's here looking after you?" And she said, I feel jealous of you. अब मुझे लगता है कि तू कितनी सुखी है. So I'm being facetious about it, but I gave it a great deal of thought, and I realized that I'm not going to give in to social pressure, and I'm not going to something which ultimately is going to make me unhappy, and because of that, I think I could live a life more or less of my own choosing. I say more or less because, of course, other factors come into play, but I think I'm happy, and I don't regret it for a minute that I chose not to have children.
To read that story, if there was no other story here, that story alone would have made this book. Fortunately, there are 24 other great stories, so you should actually buy this book. Urmila ji, I'll bring you into the conversation since you are here, and it's another beautiful. Some of the essays begin so beautifully that she says, "Memories of that night sting like a scorpion bite every time I reflect on the nuances of an emotion we call sorrow." How beautifully is that put? Urmileja, if you could just talk about your relationship with your mother, just give us a glimpse of.
Maithili ji.
Supportive she was as a mother pertains to your school and the time that you got 0 in all subjects. Would you like to talk about? Sorry, I had to reveal that thing.
My father was a member of the Communist Party, and we were living in a commune. Till the age of 9, I used to live in a 180 square foot room, which was given to 8 families, but there were people like Sardar Jafri, Kafi Azmi, etc. We had one toilet and one bathroom for 8 families. So obviously money wasn't in my father's pocket or not. So I think they decided that they should put me in a Urdu medium government school when I was 3. So I would cry every single day and drag my feet and not want to go to school at all. And when my first term results came, I got 0 in every single subject. That must be a record of kinds also. Now look at this mother of mine. I mean, it was really amazing, her observation. She said, my child is not a duffer. If she's got 0 in every single subject, she's protesting. Can you imagine for her to have that understanding? And she said she's protesting and we have to pull her out of that school. I mean, isn't it amazing? Absolutely, really.
It's a wonderful aspect of motherhood. Maithili, Rinki, one of the things that I wanted to ask and which I put right at the outset is why the oldest love story? Why?
It is her selection.
Please.
It is Rinki's idea. We had some working titles and then I said, what do we do? And all kinds of combinations, they all sounded very convoluted and weird. Then Rinki came up. You talk about it. Not many men writers. I mean, we felt that men may not be able to be that objective about their mothers. Maybe the fear of the Oedipal complex was there somewhere, that they may not be able to see their mother in, because many of the women writers have been able to see their mother not as mothers, as I said, but as women in particular circumstances, what shaped them into what they were. And it was also like a historical record. Like Manu Bhandari's story is about what happened about 120 years ago. You have the social history of the country in different parts coming through in the book. So then we said, maybe men may not be... Hello? Hello, can you hear me now? Oh, sorry. So I was unconsciously perhaps giving into the bias that men may not be able to be objective about writing about their mothers, because there is this mere paas maa hai, as we said, that possessiveness about the mother, and may not be able to see her as a woman in her own right. I'm not saying that all men are like that. Where Said says disproves that. Okay. So that was the thing, and as I said, it was a question of not making it a too large a book. And I suppose marketing also becomes difficult if you produce a huge tome. And we didn't want the book to be like bound by any feminist ideology. If there's feminism in the stories, it comes naturally, organically through the essays. Nobody is consciously making a feminist statement. And we didn't want to be bound by ideology or a theoretical framework in which we had to fit all the articles. Each story is organic and the feminism in it is personal, and the personal is always political. So you have that connection.
Before we have opened this up to the audience, just a couple of more. I'd love, Shabana ji, if you could read a short passage from your essay. That'd be lovely.
I like your self-portrait. I think it says so much. We know so much about you as a person. And you're a self-portrait. But your self-portrait is really wonderful. Each essay is followed by a self-portrait. We didn't want to have, just the dry biographical details of the writers, because these are personal essays. We said that you write a self-portrait of yourself at the end of each essay. So Shabana's is brilliant. So I request, this is my personal farmaish, that you read that part.
And I also
Yeah.
want to read another bit from her.
Absolutely,
Okay, please.
So we can't have
Totally.
enough of you reading.
When Javed and I were getting married, a wise old aunt said to him, "Watch Shaukatapa closely. If you like her, marry Shabana. Because with age, the wife grows to be exactly like her mother." I think Javed was short-changed, poor fellow. Because although I started bearing a striking resemblance to Mum, she was a much more evolved person than I am. She was wise. I continue to be impetuous. She was very forgiving. I tend to be so, not because I'm compassionate, but because I have such a weak memory that I forget and so forgive. She had one big weakness though, and that was her love for saris. I often used to tease her that if there was a competition, the sari would win over her love for cafe. She had started writing her memoirs when Abba was alive. After he passed away, she couldn't bring herself to write a word. After much coaxing and cajoling from Javed, she picked up her pen again and completed Yaad Ki Reh Guzar. It has been translated into Marathi, Gujarati, Hindi, Tamil, Japanese and English. It was selected by 14 universities in the USA for referential reading in the South Asian departments for recreating the history of those times in a voice that is distinctly female. Amartya Sen was kind enough to write a blurb for its English translation, Kafi and I by Nasreen Rahman. And this is what he said. To say that this is a lovely book would be an understatement. It is an enchanting recollection of the life of a hugely talented and sensitive human being shared with a great poet. They were united not only by love and marriage, but also by an individually assessed joint commitment to social change, artistic creativity, and personal and political ethics. In this excellent translation, we have a lively account of an important part of Indian history, fired by sympathy, inspiration, and imagination, but tempered by the hardship of reality. Excitedly, I rushed to her room to give her the news. "Who is Amartya Sen?" she asked. I proceeded to tell her that he's a Nobel laureate, a world-famous economic, etc. Duly impressed, she said, "वो तो बहुत बड़े हुए आदमी ना, बड़े आदमी हुए ना." I said, and she clapped her hands in delight. That evening, she came back home armed with 16 sarees that she had bought at one go. 16 sarees. I exclaimed, "Mummy, in my life, I have never bought 16 sarees at one time." Back came her cocky answer, "In your life, Amartya Sen has not praised you either." Then afterwards, she didn't know who he was. This is who she was. Okay, now it's very short about me actually. I am cut from the same cloth as her, but who am I? I would say I'm a woman, an Indian, a wife, an actress, a Muslim, an activist, etc. My being Muslim is only one aspect of my identity. But today it seems as though a concerted effort is being made to compress identity into the narrow confines of the religion one was born into, at the absence of all other aspects. This is not the truth about India. India's greatest truth is her composite culture. The Kashmiri Hindu and the Kashmiri Muslim have much more in common with each other because of the Kashmirian than a Kashmiri Muslim and a Muslim from Tamil Nadu, in spite of them sharing a common religion. To me, my cultural identity is much stronger than my religious identity. I love the Urdu language. I enjoy eating biryani. I revel in wearing a gharara. But I don't read the Quran or offer namaz. So what does it make me? Figure it out. And next time you rush to stereotype a community, remember that a civilized society must not look for homogeneity in the garb of nationalism. My mother taught me that identity must not be a melting pot in which individual identities are submerged. It should be a beautiful mosaic in which each part contributes to a larger whole, different but equal.
And one final thing before we have the audience with their question. I'm sure all of you are eager to ask. Sarojji, since you are also here, if there is a little that you could talk about.
I got cough, I can't talk.
Okay. In that case, I'll open up the floor to the audience. If any
Editing, collecting, manuscripts, saw me through the darkest phase of our life, one of the darkest phases. And I think all of you just must read it. It's a must read. I think it's really a must read book. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll come back again.
Maithili, about calling it a oldest love story,
Yeah, actually, we were just struggling about the title. We had many going back and forth. I in Mysore, Rinki here in Bombay, emails, we had set times to talk, and then WhatsApp messages, frantic things. I've lost a copy of this manuscript. Do you have it? Yes, I have a backup. You know that happened. Hello? Hello, can you hear me now? Yeah. So we had all these, don't worry, I've got everything on record. And then one of the things that I really liked about the book is, as Rinki said, we have stalwarts writing for us. 5 Sahitya Academy Award winning authors in one book. And then we consciously had translations from different languages. Manu Bhandari, then Vaidehi from Kannada, then here she's sitting Urmila Pawar from Marathi, and from Assamese they straight away wrote in English. But then the variety of perspectives we could get together, right from Rajasthan down to Assam, down to Dakshin Karnataka and Kerala, of course. We tend to think that Kamala Das is still with us, but she's written such a short but very succinct, poignant piece on motherhood, what the whole experience of motherhood, from being a teenage mother to a matriarch who feels hesitant to hug her adult sons in public. Then she takes a back seat in their lives. And there's something like Manu Bhandari's wrenching story of what happens to her 12-year-old mother who came as a bahu to a very orthodox family. And it's not all, the book is not all sugar and spice, my mom is the best kind of a thing, because both women question their experience of motherhood, and then daughters see their mothers, and daughters and one son. Saeed isn't here today, he says he was exhausted.
I don't know, maybe somebody has spoken about it here, about the layers. As women, how ever since the time we identify who we are and come to terms with who we are, layers creep upon us. Like I was first Ramakrishna Iyer's daughter, then I became Krishna Swami Iyer's daughter-in-law, then Venkatesh Iyer's wife, then mother. And then the layers came off one by one. The daughter layer came off first, because when I became a mom, my mother was my peer. But I tell you, I love my boys. Well, actually, they're old middle-aged men now. I love them to distraction, but when I peeled off my mother layer, I became a free woman.
Anybody has any questions?
Odd feeling that there's probably different variations of this were happening with different mothers in different ways and different intensities, but they're probably far more common than one imagines. So I wondered if there was a comment.
Other than the Mishti part and all. You want me to? Yeah. Okay. I won't comment on her essay, but what I feel what has happened is that there seems to be a kind of a conspiracy to pin the woman or the mother with all responsibility for children of the family, and we seem to equate words like sacrifice, kindness, compassion, generosity on the woman, and by association the mother, which almost seems to say that men can then compartmentalize these things in the women's jhola, in the women's box, and then they can go out and go to war and conquer the world, and if women protest, they say, but what more do you want? You have a child, right? Your creativity is fulfilled by the child, your life is fulfilled by the child, so let us go out and do things and make inventions and make war, and you remain this sacrificing, compassionate mother. And if you're not, then you are the bad woman. I have no responsibility in this. I mean, the father, we hardly ever say or anyone talk about a bad father, but it's always a bad mother. I mean, a father can abandon the family and go away, and they'll say, oh, something wrong the woman must have done, no? That's why he left her. But if a woman does the same thing, it's like bad woman, bad mother, cruel, selfish, the whole thing. So I think this compartmentalizing of traits, rather than gender, trait, whatever, equality, that is more bothersome. That you pin all these things onto the woman and then expect that she has to live up to it because this is what you imposed on her.
Any other?
Make our mothers into paragons or whatever. Is there any story which says where a child hasn't been loved by the mother? I mean, a mother hasn't lived up to her own role as a mother and made her child feel unwanted also to some extent. So, I mean, any comments on that kind of a situation?
Is being a mother. And being a mother, actually we have fewer stories on being a mother than on children writing about their mother, because I think to introspect how you are mothering your child, I think requires a lot of, it's a tough work. You have to look at yourself objectively and how your child has turned out. So then I think there's not a question of a child being unloved as much as, Sashi Deshpande later, as her son says, asks her when he's an adult, Mommy, did we interfere too much with your wife, with your work? And she felt very bad because she says, how can you, when you're writing and the child comes and says, you can't say go away. You have to get up and do your writing before they get up when they're in school and when they're in bed. So sometimes the woman, the writer in her, rebels against this curtailment of her time. And then she felt very guilty. Did I neglect my children? Did they feel unwanted at that time, that they were intruding into my creative life? I mean, she doesn't explore the whole thing, but there's a hint of that in that, like, whether you have been really a good mother at points. Because I think all of us who have been mothers, I think at some point we feel that somewhere we made a mistake. We should have done this or that. Read Sita Bhaskar's thing about agonizing about the child, the son who has, it's based on a real life in the US. She was a US-based author, and this is the only piece of fiction in the whole collection. And she's a very good writer. So she agonizes about what has I've 18 years I've raised this son. Is he capable of doing this? I have to bring him home. He's a juvenile now. I have to grow him again, she says. I hope this time I'll turn out to be good. It's really pitiless sometimes, that story.
Anybody else? There's this.
किताब इसलिए बहुत खूबसूरत है क्योंकि ऐसा नहीं है कि ये सिर्फ मीठी मीठी बातें हैं, कुछ मीठी बातें हैं, कुछ कड़वी बातें भी हैं।